guess it's no secret to anyone that global warming is a serious issue for the next number of generations, and they're going to have to deal with it. What I do sense, though, is that not everybody understands very well what the causes are and what the potential solutions to global warming are. So I'm going to give you my perspective on it. Here's a graph of historical temperatures for the globe, and you might think it goes way back to a long time ago, and you might think, well, how would you possibly measure that far back? There's a number of indirect measures that people use, pollen and studying ice and core samples and a variety of things, accepted though that this is a fairly representative measure of what the temperatures were like in prehistory. But I want to draw your attention to the last little bit of the graph near the present. You'll notice that these are actual measurements of temperature of the Earth, and there's a dramatic increase in temperature, almost exponential. Now this has a lot of impacts on the world, things like increased flooding and storms and increased fires. Not that these things didn't occur in the past, they're just more frequent now. But the biggest impact is on the melting of the ice all over the world. This shows the size of the red dots indicates the loss of ice in various parts of the world, and there are huge amounts of ice lost over a period of about 50 years, and this is carried on today and shows no signs of decreasing. In fact, it may be increasing. This has a great impact on the coastal communities. These are the places where traditionally people have developed commerce because it's close to the sea and able to ship their items out. So, but the flooding caused by the loss of ice has increased incidents through storm surges and a variety of other catastrophes. Nobody knows for sure what the cause of the increases in Earth's temperature are, but there's a pretty good idea that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has a great deal to do with it. And here is a measure from Hawaii, a laboratory in Hawaii, the measurement over a large number of years of the temperature. And you'll notice that the red line is the annual fluctuation caused by the dropping of leaves. So when the leaves drop, the amount of CO2 changes. So that's just an annual fluctuation, but the general trend is a great increase in CO2 in the atmosphere. A lot of people think that switching to renewables is the solution, and it is in part. If we were to take all the vehicles and turn them into electric vehicles, stop burning fossil fuels in our cars, it would do a great deal to reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Even these guys can be replaced by electric vehicles, which are as good as or better than than any of the other than the gas guzzling vehicles that we have today. And these are available now or very soon will be available. So eventually the whole fleet of cars and trucks will probably be replaced by electric vehicles. And there will be a greatly reduced amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And there are a number of other renewables that can help with this. For example, hydropower doesn't release carbon dioxide, and neither does wind power and solar power. All will be important things to increase so that we can reduce the amount of burning of fossil fuels. Some people suggest that biomass, which is basically burning of trees, is a renewable. It really is not. It takes about 40 years to grow a tree and about seconds to burn it. And when it is burnt, it releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So it's on the other side of the ledger. So don't let anybody tell you that this is a renewable way to reduce carbon in the atmosphere. But all of that is not going to be enough. We have to look at the larger movements of CO2 in the atmosphere. There always has been a movement of CO2 from the air into the sea and back again, and from the air into the land and plants and so forth, and back again. So this is generally be a balance, but the numbers here are much larger than that caused by industrial burning of fossil fuels. So we have to look at these larger movements of carbon dioxide and make sure that we're not missing something in these movements. Here's an indication of how much carbon is kept in the living material or the previously living material in the world, and you'll see that places like peatlands have huge amounts of storage of carbon and biomass in the ground, as well as wetlands and grasslands, and as well as the forests. So there's a lot of carbon that's stored in living and previously living material that is important in the cycle of carbon dioxide. In a natural situation, carbon is either in balance with the atmosphere, or it tends to be sequestered from the air into the living material and into the soil. In modern agriculture, though, there's a tendency for the carbon to be lost from the soil and from the earth. Over a period of 10 or 20 years, the carbon, the organic matter of the soil can be greatly reduced. And of course, it can go as far as turning it into a desert where there's no life at all, and it is neutral with respect to carbon. It doesn't store any and doesn't release any. If you look at just the organic content under the soil, under the surface of the earth, you can see what it looks like in you see where the concentrations are of carbon sequestering in Canada and Russia, where the peatlands exist, and if you could see the above soil portion, you'd find the forests in Brazil and in Canada and Russia that would be also very large. You'll notice that the deserts in the middle of the United States and in Africa and in Australia are almost devoid of carbon. So this is a bad thing to do. It takes millennia for a peat bog to develop. Does it very, very slowly, and it takes very short time for the peat bog to be drained and sucked out for things like filling your pots and so forth. So this is not a good thing to do. The carbon needs to stay where it is so that it doesn't end up in the atmosphere. Similarly, cutting down forests has a detrimental effect on carbon being released to the atmosphere. And covering the soil with asphalt in houses is also an issue that has to be a concern. Now, it used to be that people blamed the farmers in developing countries for overgrazing the areas so that nothing could survive and turning it into deserts. Well, this is only sort of true. Because if you think about it, there always have been large herds of caribou and bison and wildebeest roaming the land, and the grass never turned into desert from them. There's a difference. For one thing, these animals were not fenced in any way, so they were able to roam around, and they were encouraged to do this by predators. Kept them in tight herds and moving from place to place. So in effect, what happened was the herds would munch away at a plot of grassland and poo on it to fertilize it, and then they get moved on to some other place and would work on that one. So the grass really had a chance to recover from the grazing. Now this can be simulated in the present day. Here's a place in Zimbabwe that has been overgrazed. In the picture on the left, it's been overgrazed to the point of almost no return, and will not support much wildlife. But after just 2 growing seasons, it has been turned into the situation on the right. And the way that was done is the cattle were allowed to graze for a while, but not until the point of no return, and then moved on to some other place, and then moved back later when the grass had a chance to recover. This can be done with 400% increase in livestock numbers, so it doesn't done with the sacrifice of production. Here's what happens when you overgraze the grasses. Their roots become weak and in problems. The soil does not retain the moisture. They don't dig down to deep layers for nutrients and moisture. So it works much better to hold the soil in place by allowing periodic grazing as opposed to down to the nubs. And this can be done here as well. Here's a farmer that has, since from 1993 to 2013, I suspect he's still doing it now, but has had increases from 1.7% to 11% organic matter, and he's been profitable every year. And he's done this by reducing the amount of disturbance, so less mechanical disturbance, as in no-till. Always has arbor on the soil, and either dead material from previous times or in living material. He has a very diverse crop. He doesn't monoculture one crop in the field, but has many different crops with cover crops. He keeps living roots in the soil as long as possible, and he manages his animals much like they did in Zimbabwe. Here is the intercropping of the planting of material in the stubble of a previous year. And here's a mixed planting that keeps the insects confused and keeps the soil moist and retains moisture from rain, so it doesn't run off and wash the soil away. And when he manages his livestock, he keeps them in pens by electric fences, and he allows them to graze for a little while in one place, and then he opens the fence and moves them to the next, and he just moves them around, and this keeps the soil very moist and resilient. So, and with no loss in productivity, in fact, greater productivity. So this is something that can and should be done.